Hello, Jermaine here, and welcome to this new video series where we're going to be looking at the AngularDart framework. Now, I must admit, this has been a long time coming because there's been a lot of questions around AngularDart and exactly how to use it, and that there's not been enough examples. So in this video series, we're going to be looking at AngularDart, and what we're going to be building is a bookmarking application. So it's quite a simple app. It looks like this with a couple of bookmarks, and what we're going to be able to do is add a bookmark. We can click the link here to go to the website itself. Here we can edit bookmarks, so for beginners, experienced and beyond, and so on and so forth, and then click update, and then it captures the update. Of course, we can delete bookmarks as well, and surely we can add bookmarks. So here, example, then click update, and then it adds it there. And of course, we can go to the Patreon website there. Okay, so in this video, we'll be essentially going through how we're gonna set this up. So yeah, let's begin. The first thing we'll need to do is set up a project, an AngularDart project, and we'll do that by using Stagehand. So I've done this a couple of times. If you've installed the Dart extension for Visual Studio Code, in the latest update you can bootstrap a project using Stagehand. So I'll bootstrap an AngularDart project and I'll call it Bookmark Manager. And then I need to select a folder to place it in. And once I've figured out my folder, I'll click select. And then what will happen is we'll bootstrap the files and folders we need. And let me make this slightly bigger. And what we need to do here is to install our packages by running pubget. Optionally, I could have clicked this icon as well to get packages, or simply just save this file, which would also do this automatically. So once our dependencies are fully resolved or installed, what we're going to do is we'll run webdev serve and enable hot reloading, which will spin up a web server at localhost 8080. So what we can do is we can access this in the browser, and then this will load an example AngularDart application. So it's a to-do app, and you can add items and so on and so forth. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of all of that. So in our lib folder, essentially our AngularDart project is structured as follows. So the root component is called app, essentially app component. And then the way AngularDart works is you create these classes and then you annotate it using these app component annotations and several other annotations, which will essentially angularize it for you, if that makes any sense. So with this Angular root component, it's called app component, which allows you to specify certain details such as a selector for it, style URLs, template URLs. You can also inject directives that you create into this component so that it's usable, in the template here. And next to the component is the template here. So that's our app component HTML, which includes the directive that we imported in there, and a heading, which is what you're seeing here. And you can also add a CSS file for your component. So and of course we've defined our CSS files here as part of style URLs. And then what this component does is it also imports another component, which is what our directive comes from, and that goes in the source folder. So according to Dart file folder layout conventions, any private folders essentially will go under lib source. It'll go under the src directory under the lib folder. So we've got an example component here for our to-do list, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to create our own. Of course, that'll create an error for us, but that's no problem. We'll fix it shortly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and then this folder would have our component. We'll call it BM Scaffold, which stands for Bookmark Scaffold, and in there we're going to define our component Dart file. And what we'll do in this file is import Angular, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create our component by using the @component annotation, and then we need to define our selector, which will be BM Scaffold. So it will be an element selector, and then we need to give it a template URL, but for now I'll just put a basic template with the heading hello world, just to ensure that it's working for us. And then here I'll create a class called Bookmark Scaffold component. Okay, so let's save this file and let's import that into our app component. So in here we'll get rid of this part, and then we want our BM Scaffold component, and then we'll inject it here. So let's save this, and of course what we need to do is to actually use our component custom element in our template. So if we come to app component.html, and in here what we'll do is declare our component. So let's save this and let's see what we get. Okay, there we go. We got it rendered here. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that our component's contents are rendering on the screen, I'm going to get rid of this title and just have the BM Scaffold tag in here. So essentially in this in the template for this component is where we're going to be building our structure for our app. Instead of template, I am going to create a new file here. So this will be BM Scaffold component.html, which will hold our component in here. And then I'll change this to template URL, and I'll place a reference to our HTML file. So this is all relative paths. So I'll save that, and we should see nothing. But then if I add this in here and I save it, yeah, we should see it here again. Okay, so that looks good. We're going to be working with Bootstrap as I showed in the example to style the UI. So I'm gonna go and grab the necessary Bootstrap files. I come to download Bootstrap. I'm literally gonna grab all of this. So I need jQuery and Popper.js, and I'm gonna come to the web directory, the index.html file, and right before the main.dart.js, I'm gonna place this here, and then I need to come back here and then grab our Bootstrap CSS and minified JavaScript files. So I will place that after the earlier imports, and then save this file. So yeah, we should have this for now, and then I can come in here and start using our Bootstrap classes. So I'm going to start by creating a nav, and I'll give it a class of navbar. Then in there we'll have an anchor tag, and then it will get a class of navbar brand, and then the name of our app, so Bookmark Manager, and then I'll save this, and then yeah, we get something along these lines. And we need to add several more classes. In the generated file and folders, styles CSS has got some default styles here, so we're gonna come here and just get rid of it. So we'll have it empty because we don't need those styles, and that should solve it for us. Okay, let's remove this reference here and save it. Okay, so now we've got basic styling from the classes that we've added to our component. So now what I'll proceed to do is to add a bit more elements. So add a container, and then we need a row, and then let's start by adding a column. Then we'll give it a bottom margin bottom of 3. Okay, and then so essentially we're describing what each bookmark would look like. So for each bookmark, I'm using a card component, and each card has a card body in there. Then there's a heading 5 with a class of card title, and then there's a card text, and then there's a link to the website, card's URL, and then an edit button. So let's take a look at this. All right, there we go. So essentially it should look like this, and if I extend it, it should take 1/3 of the screen. So ideally for each of our bookmarks that we add to the page, it should have this structure. Let's put this to work by going back to our component, and then in here what we need to do is we'll create a list of bookmarks, and then I'll populate it with some data. So I've got a list populated with these details. It's got 3 items in it, and each item has a title, description, and our URL that we expect to be visited when we click the visit website button. So the way we're going to use this is, because this is a public property, we can now go to our template and be able to access it in here, and we're going to do that for our columns. So Angular has a couple of directives that we're able to use to enable us to essentially iterate over each item in our list and output it in the UI. And in order to do that, we need to import those directives. So what we do is directives, and then in an array or a list, we just need to inject core directives, which comes from the Angular package. And if I hover over this, it tells you, it explains what these core directives are, which is essentially all of these. So ng class, ng if, for, switch, and so on and so forth. Because alternatively, we can import all of these, but then the shorthand format is to do this, which I prefer this anyway. It's a lot easier to reason about. So that's the first step. We need to import these core directives, and then the second step is to now go to our component, and then we can use ng4 to loop over each of our items. So start with an asterisk, and then use ng4, and then we create a variable to represent each item in our bookmark, and then our bookmarks array from our Dart file. And then for each of our bookmarks, what we're going to do is essentially we're going to replace these using what's known as string interpolation. So it's the double open curly brackets and closing curly brackets. And then for each of our bookmarks, we want to grab the title, the description, and then we want to grab the URL. The way we can do it, we can either use string interpolation, but there is a better way, which is attribute binding. So what we do is we wrap our attribute in the square brackets, and then what AngularDart does is it'll evaluate this expression we pass it. So we'll pass it the URL, and Angular would evaluate this and give the right value, assign the right value to the href DOM property of the anchor element. So yeah, that does it for that. And then yeah, so let's save this and see what that looks like in the browser. Okay, there we go. So we've got our elements now rendering. If I hover over this, you can see at the bottom left that it's got the right web address, and of course I can click it and that takes me to the website. Okay, same for that, and so on and so forth. I think you get a picture. The last thing I want to do here and finish off this tutorial is to add the ability to delete items. So I know I put edit here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to delete, and then have delete here, and then, oh sorry, that's the wrong class, danger. And then we're going to attach a click event to this button. So the way that works is you would have the name of the event, and then you wrap it in this curved brackets essentially, and then on click we want to give it a method we wish to invoke, which would be remove bookmark. So one of the good things that AngularDart does is it statically analyzes our template. So right now it throws an error because we are using, essentially we're calling remove bookmark and the method doesn't exist. So the good thing is that AngularDart is able to statically analyze this template, and it can tell that we're calling a method or we're invoking a getter called remove bookmark, which is not defined for this class, our component class. So let's go and define it right now. In fact, before we do that, essentially we need a reference to the index of our item that we wish to delete. And the way we're able to do that is essentially we get reference to a template variable called index. So essentially we can do remove bookmark, and then we get this reference to template variable called index, which index is a reference to each item's index. But a better way of doing it is I'll create another local variable called $i, and then that'll be equal to our index. So index gets assigned to $i. And then I'll pass $i in here, save this file. We'll still get an error because we've not defined this yet. And then we'll come back to our component, and then we'll define our remove bookmark. So remove bookmark, which takes in an index. And then essentially what we're going to do is bookmarks.remove at, and then we pass in our index. So if I save this, our error should disappear and it should be successful. Okay, that's good. So now I should be able to come here and click, and then it deletes it. Okay, all right, that's good. In fact, the very last thing I wish to do is if there are no bookmarks added, we should essentially have a notification message saying that no bookmarks added, for instance. So let's do that quickly, and we're gonna come back to our template. You don't need to do anything in the component.dart file. So we'll come back to our template, and then at the top here, directly after row, I'll add a full width column, and then I'll give a class of alert and text center, and then I'll say no bookmarks added. And then essentially what we need to do is to use ngIf to display this only when our bookmarks is empty. Our bookmarks list is empty. So let's save this. Okay, so let's test it out. Delete, delete, delete. There we go. No bookmarks added. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here. I hope this has been informative and you learned something different. If you'd like to see more, do consider subscribing, and not only subscribing, hit the bell notification icon so that you are notified when the other videos are released. And of course, thank you for watching, and if you've got any comments, do let me know down below. I do read your comments and I do respond to them as quickly as I can. And yeah, read, follow, subscribe. Thank you.